Hi, how's everyone doing? I had heard another video by Pastor Alan Nolan that might have been older, and it was a compilation of that Nephilim stuff. And I also listened to that, and I also shared that. And I had never seen that one before, and I had also listened to the one I did share, to the one I talked about on the 17-minute mark. I had listened to that whole video before, and I did not remember. He might have, but I don't remember if he had mentioned the verses about David and Goliath and going into the promised land, and they're like giants and we're like Nephilim, but he might have. But I saw that night another video which was older, and it had a compilation of all of that, and that means that I think toward the end it was newer videos. But regardless, the fact is that when I brought that up that day, I forgot about the other scriptures where after the flood, they were seeing giants. So I had forgotten about those verses, and how people will probably bring that up. And of course, in the compilation video that I watched, that I found after I had done my video and already seen Alan Nolan's video, I noticed, I don't know why I was reading the comments, but I was reading some, I was reading some. And then I thought the phone went off. And then I noticed that people were asking those stupid questions that he had just gone over in his video. So I made a comment. I'm like, boy, according to these comments, people aren't listening to a damn thing that's being said in the video, because he explains all this. So I'm going to get on another topic here, and after I finish this one, and I'm going to share some videos as usual. And hopefully, if anyone does watch the videos, please listen and pay attention to the videos, okay? Maybe you hear a little bit of the video and you're like, I don't believe that. That's a heresy. That's wrong. And you don't hear the whole thing. Okay, so I just want to say that Alan Nolan tells you why that they're saying Nephilim. They say giants, which I think translates to Nephilim in original. And then they definitely said giants when they were going into the promised land, but he explains why. And it's because they're men of renown. In other words, and all the hieroglyphics all over in every indigenous people and all over the world, in every country, all over the world, there's hieroglyphics of giants, okay? And there's a reason for that too. It's because Noah, it's like your grandparents, just like the Jews. The Jews teach their children from knee high, just like the Bible tells them to. So their children know about all the Bible stories, all the Bible accounts. Same thing with Noah. Noah had to explain to his children, great children, great grandchildren, and all them explained it to their children and great, because they're wondering, Grandpa, why, there was an earth before this? And he's like, yeah, let me tell you about it. There were giants. They were called Nephilim. So when you hear about Nephilim or giants after the flood, it's basically it's like a figure of speech. Like today, we've got Sasquatch. Yeah, I believe in that. I know that's true. I know there's people that aren't lying. Now, granted, I am upset that we don't have pictures of the aliens. We don't have many pictures of Sasquatch. I've seen one guy on his channel. He gave a picture in the dark, kind of it. Now, so Sasquatch, just like that. We call it Sasquatch, but some other country is going to call it something else. And then even before that, I think it had a different name. So the name evolved. Okay. So these giants that were in Gaza, well, they were actually in the promised land, I guess. And then Jacob or Joseph finally got them all out because they went into the promised land, right? They finally got them all out, kept pushing them back. They were going back into the promised land that God had given Abraham. Then remember, they all fled to Egypt for the famine, and Joseph got sold, right? First he got sold, then he became the king's right-hand man. Then he brought his family in, and they were there for like 400 years until they forgot. The Egyptians forgot how good the Jews are, and the Jews were multiplying, and so they wanted to enslave them. So then that's when they enslaved them. And then all those other Bible stories are in that 400-year period. And then Moses let them out to go back to Canaan. They went back to Canaan, the promised land. By then, 400 years, it was getting occupied by people, and most likely the giants. Now, King David, is after they had come back into the promised land, right? So anyway, I forgot another name, like for Sasquatch. But anyway, that's why you see the hieroglyphics. That's why you see things like Nephilim in the Bible, okay? It's because it was just a figure of speech from history. They would call anything big and giant, oh, it's Nephilim. And in the promised land, when they said, oh, those are giants, and then that translates to Nephilim, it's probably because they wanted, because remember, there were 12 spies and only 2 were strong and wise and courageous and trusted God. And the other 10 wanted to scare everybody and say, oh, they're like the Nephilim, remember? The Nephilim. And they knew Nephilim didn't exist any longer. But anytime there's those giants, that's what they just called them. Okay? And Pastor Allen will explain to you when that crap was. I wrote it in a comment. It was shortly after, like a couple hundred years after Jesus died. This heresy was going around that the Nephilim are still alive. But before then, Pastor Allen explains, all the Jews knew that there were no more Nephilim. Okay? That was just a figure of speech that they used. Okay, so now I'm going to get on that subject of hell and the lake of fire. And I'm going to share, maybe I'll reshare that compilation video of Pastor Alan Nolan. If you didn't want to watch all the other ones in that new series, and if you didn't want to take my word for it, then there is a short, it's not short of a video, but it's shorter than watching all 4 of the other videos he has, maybe. And anyway, so my heaven and hell and lake of fire theory thing, not a theory, it's just the way I read the Bible. I didn't know this, but Kurt Cameron on December 3rd, I don't remember when I talked about that, but if I had known Kurt Cameron was going to talk about something along those lines as well, I would have watched the video. But I guess this video is a little older. And then he shares, okay, so that video of his, that's sort of along the lines of what I'm talking about. Let me see my history here. He goes in a little more depth, and he's mentioning things, beliefs that I've never heard of. Okay? Doctrines, because there's also obviously controversy. And okay, so he he's like speaking for other people, kind of like where you'd say, oh, well, people might call me a la la la, or people might say it's this and this, and it's not. I think is what he's saying. So I didn't listen to it super closely. So then he did this on December 3rd, I think. My energy bill dropped. And then, so December 3rd. Well, because of this, obviously, Ray Comfort, because he worked closely with Ray Comfort 6 hours ago, which just showed up. I don't subscribe to Living Waters Ministries, but I know Ray Comfort. I like him. But when this video was over, it started doing an advertisement for his stuff, and in a little tiny pictures were in the like thingy. Let me see if I could show you what I'm talking about. Well, anyway, it seemed like he had that in the pictures with him here. It looked like that black guy that is this, never mind. That black guy that is a Calvinist. He just died, actually. He's got like 7 kids. It's really sad. I think he was like 50 is all. I think. I mean, I looked at him with a magnifying glass. So see this, where was my finger? Okay, this black guy right there, dead. And he's also, there's a white guy, middle-aged. They're very good preachers, like fire and brimstone, kind of, but not, hey, the Bible is fire and brimstone, so what up? So this is Ray Comfort's site at the end of that video, and when I found out that guy and the other white guy, this black guy and that white guy that I've seen a lot, but I didn't know that they were Calvinists, so I really didn't listen to them much. But I mean, this is on Ray Comfort. So like I said, I don't know what Ray Comfort believes, but anyone to me who believes in the Bible, I mean, I don't care if you're a legalist. I don't agree with, okay, so if you're a legalist, but yet you understand, okay, if you're a legalist because you believe you can lose your eternal salvation, I mean, I see scriptures in there that say stuff like that. Although that if you really pay close attention to those verses, that you can quote unquote lose your salvation, there is absolutely no mention of eternity in those scriptures. It's just maybe implying it. And that's, I mean, unless there is one for sure that says definitely you're going to lose your salvation and you're going to hell forever and ever. You're going into the lake of fire forever. Unless those verses say that, I would be very careful about implying that that's what they are saying. Because I just noticed it the other night while I was on another video. And, the brethren, like I said, they talk about what they talk about, and it makes us think. Because we're sitting all alone, or we're doing our own thing in our own Bible study and getting the Holy Spirit speaking to us, but he can speak to us through other people as well. That's why teachers are great. So she was going over some scriptures about losing your eternal salvation. And I'm thinking, oh, that verse, now that I look at it closer, it says nothing about eternal loss. You know what I mean? And even she was quoting some in Revelation way back in the 20s. And that's talking to tribulation saints. And then if you take verses out of the 2nd and 3rd chapter of Revelation, where it's speaking to an individual church, and then like your name is going to be blotted out of the book of life. That's not to all those churches. That's a repercussion for only one of the churches. And then there's another verse that's kind of bad too. And you can't like mush it for everybody. It's not. It's only to that church. Now, if you are that church, meaning you're the individual that is acting like that, then that will happen. Like, I'll remove your lampstand. That is to that church. Unless you are that church building or you're that church individual, because we are also a church of our own, as a human being, as a person, singular person, then that verse is not talking to you if you are not acting like Sardis. Okay, so anyway, then I listened to Ray Comfort, and Ray Comfort was he loves Kirk Cameron, but he's obviously been getting some people calling him saying, "Hey, look, your buddy over here, Kirk Cameron, he seems to be changing his doctrine." What do you? So then I'll share this video too. So then Ray Comfort comes on and he's saying, "Hey, look, I love Kirk Cameron, but I am not of that belief, and we aren't." Okay, so Kirk Cameron, his son, are on their what is it, a YouTube thing, and then show podcast, yeah, that's what it's called. So it's not a sermon, it's a podcast. And then oh, I was going to show you. So Ray Comfort in 6 hours has gotten 110, almost 111,000 views. Okay. And then now let me show you what Kirk Cameron since December 3rd has gotten 163,000 views. It's 6 days old. It's called Are We Wrong About Hell? So I'm just bringing this up to show you that Kirk Cameron was explaining a teaching by a guy named Edward Fudge. Okay? Which I don't think he got the knowledge from this guy, but he probably found this guy, had heard of this guy. I don't know, maybe in his podcast he mentioned that he had read it before. But this guy, Edward Fudge, only has 18,000 views. And it's been out since 2020, October 20th, 2020. So this guy, Edward Fudge, the fire that consumes. Okay. Now, like I said, I don't know what the names of these teachings are, if there's such names to them. And I don't think there are, because, I mean, unless at the end of the Kirk Cameron's video, he might have said he agrees with such and such a teaching, which is called a doctrine. Okay. So I didn't pay much attention because I'm going to re-listen to it and learn some more stuff, because hell has a few names, and it's not even called hell in the Old Testament. And even in the New Testament, it's like outer darkness, this and that, and where the worm dieth not. And just New Testament also has different names. So then there was something else. Oh, okay, never mind. That was another subject. So anyway, yeah, this guy, okay, like I've told you before, the original government, the original kingdom was God. We're human, we're sinful, fallible. Our governments and kingdoms are going to be flawed. Now, our government has our judicial system, and our original one, we got it from the Bible, because we were a nation under God at one time, remember? So ignorance is not permissible in the court of law. That comes from the Bible. You can't claim, "Oh, I'm ignorant, God, I didn't know." No. And we get it from the Bible. It's in the Old and the New Testament. You can go find that yourself. And so this guy, just what little I've listened into 20 minutes of it, and I'm not really paying that close attention because I'll do it later. Now, Edward Fudge keeps alluding to this phrase, like, if I were a lawyer. And I thought that way myself before he said this. I've thought to myself before, like how a lawyer has to lay out all the facts and then judge and stuff. And then they have to pull from other facts that are truths. And like, I'm always doing this with Jesus. older days, and even a little now. So this guy is using that same lingo. He's like, if I were a lawyer and I were, had all this evidence laid out, there's Gehenna, there's lake of fire, which we know is the main thing, the lake of fire, because hell gets thrown into the lake of fire, but there's the pit. There is, like all consuming fire. I don't know. No, there's not that one. That's God himself. And I just read that Psalm. I think last night I did last night, but I think it's Psalm 31:28. Psalm 31, the last verse. God is an all consuming fire. But anyway, maybe it's not. So, but this guy, Edward Fudge, and I mean, I can't stand it. Even in, like I was telling you, Alan Nolan's comments, they're not even listening. There's like over 6,000 comments in Cameron's, so I ain't reading all that. But the first some few that I'd read, they're all like, "Oh, Kirk Cameron, pray for him," or "Oh, this is terrible. He needs a real teacher to teach." And Kirk Cameron knows the Bible. He's been teaching it for a long time. Okay, so, but they're all, in other words, the few that I was reading, they're against it, okay? They're against what Kirk Cameron and his son are talking about. And they're not even listening. See, you can tell by the comments they're not. All it is you're being a lawyer, like you should be, and you're taking all the evidence in the Bible, and you're not just taking it at face value, which you've been taught all your life, even though it never made sense to you. You're being a lawyer. You're taking the verses and you're putting them up against each other, and that's not a doctrine. Sorry, it's not. That's called studying. That's called finding out what God is really trying to say. So, I'm just saying, I noticed it on Alan Nolan's channel. I noticed it. Well, Alan Nolan, they were saying stupid stuff that he already explained, and they act that whatever they're saying sounded like they didn't even hear what he said on the subject. And then, with Kirk Cameron, you can tell, because it sounded to me like it was like a study. Like, let me ask you this verse and this verse and that and that and that. Let's all learn this together. It sounded like a teaching. I didn't know that at the very end, he was going to kind of say, if it's a doctrine, I don't think it is, but I think he said, well, this is what I believe after all the evidence, right? So, but in the comments, they act like they aren't even listening because of their analysis of him. It's like, you're not even on the same page. You're not comparing apples with apples here. You're comparing oranges, and he wasn't even talking about oranges. He's talking about apples. All he was doing was Bible scripture comparison, and you're doing critical thinking, and you're thinking about them, right? Like a lawyer would. And and then they don't want to give any reasoning. All they want to say is, "Oh, that's bullshit." Well, you just flat out heard all the proof. Why is it bullshit? Are you calling God bullshit? Because he just proved it all, you fool. But no, we want to blindly follow the ununderstandable verses that really don't make sense to anybody, but we were taught. Okay, I hope you people aren't like that. So, I'm going to share the Kirk Cameron video that's 6 days old. I'm going to share the 6-hour-old video by, what's his name that I just said? Okay. And I'm going to share this video on Edward Fudge that I haven't even heard yet, but Kirk Cameron said go down there and get the link for Edward Fudge because he referred to him a few times. And they're going to give also other people that are more ancient than Edward Fudge. He's an older man, but maybe this is from 2020. But Edward, I think, is talking about people that are, I think, still alive, maybe some that are no longer alive, but are like Albert Einstein, for example, is so old, long gone dead. But that's an example of, I think he's going to give people from, like, say, Luther, Martin Luther, stuff like that, you know, and just ancient Christians from right after Jesus' ascension into heaven, and it was all over for everybody. It was just, you're on your own from here on out, except the Holy Spirit. Just look up, keep looking up, keep watching for the rapture. And they have for 2,000 years. So anyway, yeah, I wanted to clarify that about the Nephilim. If you don't want to listen and pay attention and hear what's being said, and then if you disagree, have a constructive, intelligent disagreement in a comment, okay? And then same thing with Kirk Cameron, and if you don't understand, if it's above your head, just, there's no shame in that. You don't have to do some stupid comment just because you don't have to comment at all. Just read the other ones and see how stupid. So it's like, just listen, and if you can understand it, or if you want to pray about it, if you don't want to believe it, even this guy, Edward George, he says, don't believe anything I'm telling you tonight. You need to pray about it. You can't just blindly believe a teacher unless your spirit says that's truth. That's possible. But if you're sitting there and you're like, I admire this teacher, so I want to believe what he says. In Timothy, it says the teacher needs to have respect. You need to like him. Okay? In the world, though, it says, woe when all men speak well of you. That's talking about the world. You don't want the world to speak well of you. You know what I mean? You know what God means is what I mean. Do you know what God means? He don't want the world speaking well of you. Woe to you when all men speak well of you. But that's different than in Timothy, where all men must speak well of you if you are a teacher, or whatever they're called back then in Timothy. I don't know if it's about the congregation must all like him, or, any pastor walking around today, he'll get respect from the world, because, that's kind of how people are. They're like, oh, it's a pastor. So anyway, this guy, George, says Edward, he is saying that, I may not understand it when I first hear it. I'm half listening, but when I fully listen, but compared to what I've been saying lately, what I feel God has put in my spirit about hell and death being cast into the lake of fire, and then the backslidden and lukewarm and such, they're going to be dunked into hell. And I've heard this guy now, Edward Fudge, say something about some Catholic teachings he's mentioning them. I haven't listened closely. So the impression I got is that he's saying that's where the Catholics get it. So not everything the Catholics are, like I've said, you never know. They're the ones that had the Jewish Bible before we got it, and the Catholics are who gave us our Bible. So, yeah, this Edward Fudge, you can hear what he's saying. I'm thinking they're kind of and it makes a lot of sense what Kirk Cameron brought up. I mean, I really don't want to, not in the mood to get into this, but it's kind of like God is a fair God. Remember in the Old Testament, he says an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. In the New Testament, the guy, the debtor, he was forgiven his debt of billions of dollars, yet his servant owed him $5, and he was going to sell him into slavery. And they went and told on him, and they put him into prison because they're like, I forgave you all that much, the judge did, and yet you are not forgiving this servant of yours for $5. I'm going to throw you into prison. Jesus says, it's a parable. Jesus says, trust me, that servant will be given up to the tormentors and will be tormented until he pays every last mite. I mean, so maybe the guy doesn't want to be tormented anymore, so maybe he immediately forgives. Maybe he doesn't. But Jesus says, as long as he wants to stay unforgiving, he's going to be tormented. Okay? So we see this fair and justness in the Bible with God, his laws that he wants us to abide by. But there are plenty of unfairnesses in the world where people get off scot-free, right? But that's not supposed to be that way. It's supposed to be, it's fair. And then it makes the person feel, yeah. So then when, like us, we just want justice. If someone goes and rapes and murders some of your family, you want that guy to go to prison. You want justice. Does it mean you want him to go to eternal lake of fire, hell, and damnation and be tormented for eternity? I mean, his life was only a vapor. See, to me, this is their spin. So the punishment fitting the crime kind of deal. And there's verses on that. Like they use the example of a grandma. A grandma was unsaved, but she was a good person, never did a crime, was very nice, very loved. All her family and children loved her. She's unsaved, she's dying and going to hell. But yet you got Hitler or Stalin. They're not going to both get the same degrees of hell. Okay? Now, so I've told you what I think, how they get dunked, Okay, so God made us humans. We're a finite mind. We can barely wrap our heads around eternity, either one, heaven or hell. It's obvious. That's why many people are unsaved, because they don't take God seriously, right? They can't comprehend how serious it is. So if God made us to where we don't understand those things, yet he's going to punish somebody, torment for an eternity where it's brutality unlike you've never known, that you don't even know exist. Hell is created for the demons. I mean, and yet you're a human and you're in there for all eternity just because you didn't accept Christ, but you were a good person. And I'm not condoning this. I'm not saying that at all. What I'm saying is God in history of his Bible has always been fair. Now, it may not have seemed fair that he allowed Joseph to get sold into slavery, some things he allows in our lives that we're like, oh. But hey, that's for learning. And you're a human, and we're sinful, and we live in a sinful world. The only difference with our sin is it's covered by the blood of Jesus. And we are cutting back on our sin. You know what I mean? Like the Bible tells you to. Don't be arguing with me now, you sleazy gracers. So anyway, not that any of them do, but I'm just saying. And that's a new term, sleazy grace, because, yeah. Anyway, I'm just saying God is fair and just. So, my scenario, where I'm getting it from the verses, from the scriptures, if you're a granny that's unsaved, well, that's eternity right there. But I mean, if you're like, I don't know. I just think for the crime, you're going to get dunked longer. But they're talking about something a little slightly different, and they're actually even more in depth. So, and if there's a name to that teaching or not, I do not know. But they do bring up a couple of teachings that I don't remember their names. Uh, so anyway, yeah, this Edward Fudge, he has like 163 comments, and hopefully they're not all freaking stupid and, well, I have been in a discussion with two scholars concerning my traditionally held belief of ECT. After watching this video and studying intensely for 3 weeks, I have left the ECT camp. I don't know what that stands for. It truly is life or death, not eternal life or ongoing eternal death. See, that's the thing. Why is the punishment so severe? I'm not talking about salvation here. I'm talking about the saved, or maybe even they're talking about all of them. They're talking about all of them. They're talking mostly about the unsaved. So they're going to show you verses that prove, like I told you just now, like last night when I was commenting and reading some verses that this girl was saying, it popped into my mind, probably Holy Spirit, and not all of them, but that particular one, maybe it was in Hebrews 10. And I'm like, but that verse doesn't say eternity. Yeah, it doesn't say eternity. See, that's why it's so important to know the definition of salvation. Because there's two salvations. There's your eternal salvation, and then there's just salvation. What's the other salvation? Non-eternal, because you're in a life that's not eternal. This life is human. This life is not eternally human. You need to be saved from it all the time, all day long. You need to work out your own salvation. Plus, God is saving you. So see, people want to smack that word salvation on only eternity. And that is not correct. So when you take the verses like Hebrews, it has no word of eternal in there. It may say salvation, I guess. I don't remember. But you're going to lose your earthly salvation, perhaps, because that's what Jesus came to earth to do, is to save you eternally from hell and, save you here on earth. Because if he's not your Lord on earth, the demons are your, maybe not your Lord and Master, but they're running your life because you're not allowing Jesus to run your life. So whether you're saved or unsaved, if you're saved but Jesus isn't your Lord, you're not working out your own salvation, and neither are you really getting saved from Jesus. Now, he might be saving your life a few times from death, earthly death, but I'm just saying, we read these scriptures so loosely sometimes, and probably in the end times here, Jesus is opening up some understanding. And those verses, we assumed they said eternal salvation, but they don't say, not one of them have eternity in it. And what makes you, and did you read the context? What makes you think he's talking about eternity? He's talking about losing your earthly salvation, meaning you're being handed over to Satan. If you don't walk the road, Jesus is butting out. You ever heard that phrase? He's a gentleman. He's not going to force you. So if you're like, I choose myself and the world and the devil, because yourself and the world invite the devil. So if that's how it goes. But if you don't want Jesus, if you're not abiding in the vine, go read the parable. There's that one. There's another one about the branch that doesn't abide in the vine. It withers and dies. It doesn't lose eternal salvation, but it does wither and die, as in a human can die. It withers and dies, and then it is cut off. Because you don't leave a dead branch on a vine. You cut the dead branch off, and you cast it into the fire. It didn't say eternal, because on earth he has parables about going through the fire. You build your house. Now that one, if you build it out of wood, hay, and stubble, that house is going to get burned up at the judgment, not here on earth necessarily. But see, the one about abiding in the vine, and if it withers and dies and it's cut off and chucked into the fire, is burned. You can get burned on earth, not in the literal sense, but if you don't make Jesus your Lord, it's a crapshoot. Because, I mean, yeah, you're saved, the way I see it, from eternal hell, as long as you meant it in your heart. But God knows the mind. He knows that we can't comprehend eternity and eternal hell and heaven. And we're going to veer off probably because we don't even see you, Jesus. You're invisible. How can we have a relationship with an invisible person that doesn't really talk to us? Like a normal earthly friend kind of deal. God takes all this into consideration. So when he cuts that branch off, because you're not abiding, so you're withering, your relationship with him is withering. And he says, on that day, I will say, I never knew you. So the ones that don't say eternity, they could possibly be a salvation on earth. Meaning he's not going to get you out of trouble anymore or all the time. He might get you out of trouble as in to save your life because he doesn't want you dying yet, because he knew your death date and your birth date before you ever were born. So if you're going to serve the enemy or yourself and your purpose for him has passed, he's going to just let the enemy take you out. But if your purpose has not ended yet, he might have to save your life from getting killed a few times, because he doesn't want you getting killed. Even though you're not living for him, he doesn't want to get you killed because your purpose for him hasn't been served yet. Anyway, I guess that's about all. If you're interested, but I you can watch these, but otherwise I did just mainly also want to talk about the Nephilim thing, because the Nephilim, the ones that want to talk about, what about Sasquatch? Yeah, there's a Sasquatch, but he's not a Nephilim. He's not a Nephilim. I don't know what he is. He's a freak, okay? Freak of nature, but he ain't a Nephilim, okay? Because we'd all have some Nephilim by now. By now. Because the flood was a long, long, long time ago. So yeah, they had exceptional strength. No, wait, the giants. The giants were just a freak of nature. Okay? The Nephilim were like, now there were some interesting questions, like saying, oh, angels don't have sex organs and they don't have sperm. So yeah. But hey, God said they did it, so they did it, y'all. They can shapeshift into an animal with a penis, okay? And some sperm. They can whip up some sperm. Who knows? Maybe they just, have you guys ever seen that movie, a rated R movie, like years ago? I shouldn't have been watching it as a child, but my mother, I guess, and I don't think we watched it on no, it was on TV, yeah. But we rarely had a TV. But, anyway, I forgot what the movie's called. I tried to think of the name of it the other night, but it was supposedly a movie of a real account where a poltergeist, which are demons also, was literally raping her. So maybe it was a scenario like that where the angels were not visible. Now, angels can present themselves on earth, same as Noah and Lot, when the angels made themselves look like men. Same thing when they visited Abraham before they burned down Sodom and Gomorrah. They said one of those angels was God himself, and then two others were angels. That's why out of the three men, only two went to Sodom and Gomorrah. But anyway, they, even if they can look and feel like real human beings, God can do anything. If he wants to put semen inside of their body, he can. And then they impregnated the women because that's what God said they did. Okay, and if you knew the proper Hebrew and Greek, that it has to be flip-flopped when you read it, then it makes total sense. Because God isn't going to contradict himself and say, I killed all living things. And then yet, whoops, no, some Nephilim survived. No, that's not possible. Okay, my nose itches, I guess. Okay. I can't be silly. Okay, well, bye, you guys, and I hope you're interested, because at least there's hope for lost people. It's kind of like if you hated somebody for doing a crime to you, you know, and I know some people have flippantly said, oh, go to hell, you know, but if you really knew, you would not want them. You see, you wouldn't, no one should ever want anyone to be tormented like that eternally, cognizantly, like tortured like that. So that doesn't fit the crime. Now, what we'd rather have happen is that probably that this is called fair judgment of God. God has a kingdom. God has judgment. God has justice. God has laws. God has government. That's where we all get it from. So, the extremity of the punishment is what's in question here. Because if someone did that to you, you would, at the worst, it can't bring your child back or your loved one back. But what you might hope is, I hope that they go to hell and the exact same thing happens to them. Right? But then as a human, when would you ever be satisfied for them to stop doing that to them, torturing them, tormenting? Maybe they repent. But see, by then you'd be in heaven yourself with your loved one. Right? Wouldn't you? But see, that you just have to, we're human in God's image. So he has rules, laws, he has justice and judgment. But the whole point is that being in hell for all eternity, before it's cast into the lake of fire is what I'm saying, before God has stopped using it for the fire pit. So you might be dunked in there. You know what I mean? Like, suppose you never forgave the person that murdered your loved one. You could be dunked in hell for that, because vengeance belongs to God. You're supposed to love God and have no other gods before him, remember? So if you stay bitter and angry and unforgiving of that murderer of your loved one, then that means you're putting yourself above God, because you're going to do what you want to do and stay unforgiving instead of what God told you to do, and put God first. So anyway, I forgot what I was saying with that. The CMEs are hitting, and I've been praying for my brain. So, yeah. Okay. Well, have fun, and God bless you. Hope you enjoy the videos.